So I had the privilege of meeting Mike, many years ago. It's been a decade maybe. 6 or 8 years ago, something like that, at a Cornerstone Music Festival, which was one of the largest music fests in the country at one time. And I was teaching one of their workshops on apologetics.
Yep.
And I remember in the middle of class, you asked me something about Calvinism versus Arminianism, and it cornered me to have to scramble and show my cards in front of a bunch of people I was trying not to show my cards to. And it was something I admired about you from the beginning, is that you're not afraid to ask hard questions. And we talked after that lecture. You and I got together and talked, and I think we went for lunch and hung out and got to know each other pretty well. And we've been texting back and forth and connected here and there periodically ever since. But last night's show, I kind of felt sorry for those of you that couldn't be there, because it felt like this moment. It was like a God in the room type moment, and it felt very daylight-ish. And like we even discussed even this morning, the song you just played, and obviously there's some controversy in the song, and there's a lot of churches that you'd have to preempt the pastor if you're going to play a song like that. And I feel like we're a safe place where you can say, I feel like I'm losing my head. God, are you even out there? And we try to promote the fact that there's no question off the table here, and you can ask the tough questions. And so every time I've heard Mike, I've appreciated his voice. I think he has a prophetic voice. I think he sounds like Jesus a whole lot of times when he opens his mouth. And so I wanted to get him in front of you guys and say hi and see what happens. We do this thing called Convos with cool folks. We don't have a slide for it today, but it's basically unscripted, off-the-cuff conversations that we have no idea where. I have a general direction I'd like to see part of the conversation go, but that's as far as it goes. So anything can happen. But Mike, say hi and introduce yourself.
Good morning. My name is Mike. I sing into microphones very loudly. I've got a beautiful bride. We'll be married 9 years in July. We're from Michigan, but we live in Nashville, I guess, until we move here, until you all convince us to come up here. Yeah.
I've been taking him to the restaurants, trying to get that, slide it in there. This is the foodie capital of the world. So tell us, kind of, give us a 2-minute version of your history. Like, how did you end up here doing what you're doing?
Yeah. Long story short, I've loved music since before I came out of the womb. My mom told me that she used to play music while I was in the womb, and I just kind of shot into existence loving music. And I did a choir class in 8th grade, and I had to sing for the exam and made all the girls in the class blush, and I thought, okay, there's something here.
There's something to this.
And then I used that to slowly wear Shannon down and convince her that it was a good idea to spend the rest of her life with me, and now I'm spending the rest of my life trying to convince her that that wasn't a bad idea.
Last night I was asking him, I asked Shannon, what was it about Mike that made you want to spend the rest of your life with him, and vice versa. And you could tell they both didn't want to exit during this conversation. Like, they wanted to hear the other's response. So what was it about Shannon?
She was the first person I'd ever dated and been with that I felt seen, and I felt like I could be myself. And I feel like for those of us who are in a relationship or married, there's the way that you talk when you're with your friends and other people that you know and go to church with. But then there's like the weird way that you talk with your spouse. It's like, oh, babe, you do, babe. It's like you turn into an infant. You're like the small child that hasn't even learned how to speak yet. And I'm like, I can be that with Shannon. It's embarrassing, as you just heard. But I just felt like I could be myself around her. And we have this thing that I've been trying to figure out how to put in a song, but I'll say to her, I wish you could see the you I see. And I wish you could see, or I could see the me you see. And she brought the best out of me. So, yeah. I was long-winded.
No, it wasn't long-winded at all. So, talk about music. What's been your proudest musical moment?
Man,
yeah, obviously last night, for sure.
This has been unbelievable. Yeah, this is one of my favorite memories. The one that's coming to mind is Cornerstone, and we were the last band the last night of the very last Cornerstone. We headlined that, and that was a pretty magical moment for us, feeling like we were carrying the torch for a lot of bands that want to have the conversation about faith and what it means to be a human, what it means to chase after the beauty and the hope of Christ, but in a way that's not just boxed up and available only in family Christian bookstores. We wanted to appeal to the masses. So that was a really important show for us.
We touched on that just briefly this morning. Is there's to me there's like this fear that and again, no idea where this conversation is going, but there's this fear that Christian artists are forced to carry because they're not allowed to explore the darkness a lot of times. And I think as you read Scripture, you read the Lamentations or the darker Psalms, or all throughout Scripture, there's passages that just they're gut-wrenching in a sense of, I feel lost, or I feel broken, or God, where are you? Even Jesus on the cross says, Father, where have you gone? Yeah. And those are the parts that get left out of the music that we hear on the radio. Yeah. And so I hope that our church is a place where an artist can come in and just be honest. Honesty is a virtue in Christianity as well, and it sometimes gets flattened. But how do you walk that tightrope of like popular Christian culture and the expectations of popular Christian culture versus honesty and brutal transparency?
Oh man, I make fun
just to throw you a softball.
yeah. It's so weird. We were talking about this last night. Part of me has wrestled with like, am I still a Christian? Because which I am, but there's so much about the whitewashed like male patriarchy Christian culture where like we sweep everything under the rug and we pretend like everything's okay, that I really I think the best way I can say is I hate it, and so the way that I deal with it as rage and anger and writing about it and songs, complaining with it to Shannon and her also educating me on it, and just really trying to comb through Scripture and read and educate myself on who is Jesus, who really was Jesus, not the guy that we've created as a means to manipulate people and not the Jesus who drives a Ford and votes a particular way, but the Jesus that healed the sick, was kind and loving to the woman that he caught in adultery and just loved her where she was at. Who is that Jesus, and how do I chase after him?
What is it about Jesus? Why is that? I know a lot of times you talk about Jesus and Christ, and what is the appeal?
To me, it's you've got these 11 guys, and not to mention the fact we talked a little bit about this last night too, these women who, financed the entire ministry for this guy that we've all been talking about and arguing about for thousands of years. But if what happened is true, there's this book called Fox's Book of Martyrs that documents the way that Peter died. He was crucified on a cross upside down because he said he wasn't worthy to die in the same manner as his Lord. Thomas was ripped apart in India, I believe, and Paul was beheaded. So you look at these people who had this encounter with someone, and it changed their lives, 11 people, and they set the entire Mediterranean rim on fire because they were so provoked and compelled by the impact this person made. So for me, even if I were an atheist or an agnostic, it would be so difficult for me to ignore the weight of that person's impact. And then seeing, and having conversations with you and other people, and seeing the way that the light in someone's eyes changes when they've brushed up against the divine. There's a difference in people that are walking with Christ. And I think for me, at a very early age, going to church and seeing people raise their hands to the heavens in this sort of surrender to the mystery of life and what it means to be human, I thought, I've done a lot of drugs. They're not as good as whatever y'all have. I'll take more of that, And so Jesus he's just the most compelling story I've ever heard, and I'm still interested in learning about it and telling it.
You know, one of the things you talked about last night that I'd never heard you talk about before was one of your songs where at the beginning of it, your dad comes out of the house with a gun and fires it in the air and scares off a bunch of crows or ravens. And I want to make sure we have ample time to talk about the topic at hand this morning. And that seems like, to me, a pretty traumatic event. Yeah. And life-changing and life-altering. And for those of you that didn't get to see it, I think we have a recording so you can go back and watch the show and hear the whole thing. But one thing you told me at Audio Feed a couple years ago was, so we met at Cornerstone Festival, but then we've rejoined each other at Audio Feed, I think, a couple times. Yeah. And usually it's over pizza or something like that. And you were talking, you were pretty, you're highly transparent during those moments and just talking about a brutal time you've been through and kind of a dark time in your life. But actually, I won't spoil it. Well, remind me later about our conversation back here when I asked you when you were happiest in your life, if I forget. Yeah. But talk about that. Christianity allows for that space of misery. You know, there's a way of a cross, and the crucifixion was ugly. And in some sense, Christianity is allowing us to experience the mire and the muck and the pain of disenfranchisement from our parents and the pain of relationships and sometimes the pain of addiction. But then there's like this pulling away from that says this isn't where you belong. Yeah. And it seems like you've kind of walked that journey a little bit. So talk about that for a bit.
Yeah. So for me, I mean, to give everyone context in terms of the really brutal season that Shannon and I walked through and what we had talked about. I saw porn for the first time when I was 3 years old, and when I told my therapist that, he's like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." You know, so that usually doesn't happen to people until they're in their early teens. So, long story short, my parents split up when I was really young, not long after the age of 3, and I was left alone a lot as a kid. My dad would just have different women at the house every night, or just drinking. You know, they'd constantly be playing cards and drinking. So I was either by myself in a room, going through a dirty magazine, or listening to music. And those were the ways that I kind of coped with feeling alone and unloved. And I didn't know it then. I knew it was bad. I knew I shouldn't be doing it, but that was what my kind of brain taught myself how to cope with that feeling of being unlovable. So you pack all of that trauma alongside an abusive father, and then you kind of tuck that all away, and then you bring that into a marriage, right? We carry all of our ghosts into our marriage. And so those addictions and those things really started to manifest themselves a few years into our marriage and nearly drove Shannon and I apart. And that really became the season for us where we realized, you know, I've got some stuff I really need to work through. And you get to a point where, you know, for me, I realized necessity is the mother of invention. I realized that it wasn't my fault for the things that happened to me when I was young. And it wasn't my fault that I was exposed to that at such a young age. But it is now my responsibility to receive the love I don't feel worthy of, and then do the work to let go of those addictions and those things that were destroying my wife and myself and our marriage, you know? Yeah.
There's so much goodness there to unpack, man. So I've probably said this 100,000 times in our churches. One of my favorite movie scenes but there's this movie scene from I can't think of the name of the movie right now. It's where Robin Williams was a psychiatrist. Good Will Hunting. Where he finally breaks down and Robin Williams who's the actor? My brain's not working right now. That's what I said, Matt Damon. And Matt Damon breaks down and is weeping, and Robin Williams is holding him. And it starts as a joke to Matt Damon, but he's holding him. He says, "Son, it's not your fault." And Matt Damon, I know. And he says, "No, it's not your fault." He says, I know, I get it. He says, "I know it's not your fault." He says, I know. And then by the end of it, he's just sobbing uncontrollably as he comes to this realization that the abuse he's suffered and the trauma that he's experienced is not his fault. But there comes with that movie scene or the mentality that follows after that movie scene, kind of a victim mentality can occur, where you can say, it's not my fault, therefore I'm stuck here.
Yeah.
And you're bucking against that a little bit. You're saying you've realized that some of the trauma you experienced was not your fault, but you also carry a responsibility.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Yeah, so for me, the responsibility is looking at the redemptive work of Christ. You know, I used to look at the crucifixion and think like, well, I'm a worm, I'm a scumbag, I'm a really, really terrible person, and Jesus died so that God could stand the side of me, which I think is an insane way to view it. I look at it now and think, because of God's great love for us, I can see that love displayed through the crucifixion, and I think about it like the weight we all carry from the trauma and the pain and the wounds that were passed down to us from our parents, being bullied in high school, whatever kind of pain and trauma we're carrying, that weight was carried for us by someone else. And so when we step into those moments of pain and sorrow and doubt and fear, whatever it might be, learning to remember, oh, wait, I don't have to carry that anymore. Mm-hmm. As step one, because it was carried for me. But then the other part, which is where I feel like this isn't like the sexy, cool part. This is where you really got to roll up your sleeves and do the work. And what I think church is you take the pain, your pain, whether it's depression, addiction, anxiety, these things that, you know, our whole album is about. And my therapist said, okay, go write about nearly losing your wife. Go write about your porn addiction. Go write about your depression. Go write about not knowing whether or not you believe in God anymore. So then I took all of that, put it into an album, and then went and toured all over the country and have impacted thousands of people. And I say that not to be like, and I'm so cool, check me out, Dad. You know, it's more I could have allowed my pain to be the catalyst for ending my marriage, but instead I pursued Christ and took that pain. If you think about pain or trauma almost like energy, right? You can use wind, and if you do nothing, it can knock over a barn. But if you build a windmill, you can channel that energy and create electricity. Mm. So it's like I redirected that energy and that pain and allowed it to almost like there's a hole inside of me that I was born with, right? There's this trauma that we carry. There's a book by Henry Nouwen called The Wounded Healer. And it's this idea that our wounds, if we allow them, we can open ourselves up and let the healing of God come into us, flow through us, out of our wounds and into the wounds of other people. And that exchange is where healing occurs on both sides of the spectrum. So to me, when I see Jesus' response to suffering as surrender, and the response to his suffering and the suffering of the world is surrender, and so for me, it's trying to do that as well in my own way, and that's where I've found a lot of healing.
I'm reminded of there was, and I've shared this at my church some times in my life when I was just emotionally crushed, and just didn't feel like I could put one foot in front of the other. And there's always been a passage I turn to, which is Romans 5:3-5, and it talks about rejoicing in hard times. And it says, which if you just throw that out there, that when you're having a hard time, if you're experiencing depression or anxiety or suicidal ideations, which we'll touch on in just a second, if you're experiencing any of that, to say rejoice in that almost feels like a slap in the face. If you just leave it there, and that's the only comment, then that seems kind of the antithesis of the advice that you need. But it says to rejoice in hard times because hard times develop perseverance, and perseverance develops your character, and character develops hope, and hope will never disappoint you because the love of Christ is poured out by his Spirit. And so I think there's some truth to it's not your fault. Yeah. There's also some truth to you have work to do. Yeah. But the work is not pulling up your bootstraps and getting your head on straight. Yeah. It's working to surrender. Yeah. It's working to submit to the work that God is already doing and wants to do. And so in some sense, it's the hardest work on earth because giving up your life isn't fun for anybody. In some sense, it's the easiest work on earth because all you got to do is lay down and let God do his thing. Last night, it surprised me over dinner. You mentioned that, because I vaguely remembered when we talked at audio feed that you talked about how you weren't suicidal, but you had like, life is horrible, I could gladly give up thoughts. But last night you talked about even being on suicide watch with some of your friends.
Yeah.
Talk about that. Where were you? Unless you don't want to talk about it, we can talk about something else completely.
I mean, it's a dark place, you know, and I think I've been there during that time. I've been there since that time, and you know, for me, when I get there, it's I mean, even getting out of bed and making my bed, it feels like trying to climb Everest. And it's a really, really dangerous place to be, because you can at least for me, you start to form this narrative of, well, all that I'm really doing is causing pain to the people I love, my wife and my friends, or you know, maybe I've let our fans down. So maybe the greatest gift I can offer the world is to just not be here anymore. And then you start to think, well, that's the most noble thing I can do, which is a very dangerous place to be. But having been there several different times in my life, I can say, you know, the thing not to do is just, well, pray your way through it, brother. It's like, no, like get on the phone and call somebody and go somewhere, you know, avoid being alone as much as possible in those times. And I would also, you know, for me, recognizing as hard as it is that when people say this too shall pass, sometimes when you go through those dark times, it's the only thing that has gotten me through them is clinging to this idea that it's not going to be this way forever. Mm-hmm. You know, that's like hanging by a thread.
You know, so my thought about it is, and I've lost my thought, so I don't know what my thought is. So you keep talking.
I mean, my encouragement to anybody, you know, that's ever dealt with those, you know, those types of emotions or is familiar with that darkness, you know, just don't feel like you're a burden. Don't feel like you're not. Oh, hello? Did I lose? Can you hear me okay? I'm not sure if this is. There it is. They're like, shut up, Mike. You're not a burden. You know, and I would say, there it is. Hello. You're not a burden. You're not going through that because you're not spiritual enough. You're not going through that because you're not praying enough. Or sometimes, and we talked a little bit about this too. There's definitely the spiritual component of depression. I believe in that, but there's also a neurological and a biochemical component as well. My brain, and I have my blood tested recently, and my doctor said, your brain isn't producing the right amount of serotonin. Your body's also not producing enough hormones, so I have a hypothyroid immune disease. That was really difficult. That was a bit of a tongue twister. So there's two different components. There's a spiritual component that needs to be met, but also maybe you just need some antidepressants, or maybe you just need a therapist. And it's not one or the other, it's both. And so I think having a holistic approach to anxiety and depression and a balance, that's something that I've found that's really helped me. Something that John Mark McMillan had helped me with. We had some really good talks about depression when I was on tour with him. He said his therapist told him to use the acronym HALT. And it means, are you hungry? Like whenever you get low or you get moody, like, are you hungry? Are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling lonely? Or are you tired? And often, a lot of the times, it's one of those things. So if you can just meet that need, not always, but a lot of times it'll solve it. So,
you know, it's funny, that thought that I just completely lost, that just crashed and burned, was that thought. There it is, brother. I've heard it said many times is pray for your headache and take a Tylenol, or trust God but lock your car doors. And we kind of espouse that around here, is that God wants to do a spiritual, supernatural work in you, and there's transformative work that God wants to do. But we're also, the Spirit's living in flesh, and that flesh doesn't work the same for everybody because we live in a quite fallen world, and a world that doesn't operate optimally. And so I appreciate you talking about your therapist and the new meds that you're on. You mentioned to me that, and now he's trying to find balance because the new meds are causing him to have difficulty sleeping. And so you don't just pull a lever and all of a sudden your problems are solved in that direction either. It's a holistic approach. And so that's what we espouse here. We believe God does miracles. We've seen amazing things happen, but we also believe God has partners with us as human beings, both in our own treatment and therapy. So in some sense, you've got to pull your own bootstraps up, and you've got to do the work, do the grind. But also that it occurs in community, and God has blessed the world with scientists and brilliant minds and people. I was just talking to my friend Daniel Owakashe back here, and he's studying biokinetics and physical therapy. And if you're a person that says just pray the pain away, then his career is completely useless. But God has blessed him with a mind, and blessed him with ingenuity, and blessed him with good teachers, and blessed us with the history of science that has come down to this point where he can make a legitimate difference in people's lives. And it's both spiritual because he is a spiritual being, but it's also physical and material because he's a physical and material being, and we are both. And so if you're at the end of your rope, if you're having these moments where you think something which sounds noble, I would be doing a service to my people if I was just gone. You can get all kinds of thoughts in your heads that'll mess you up, or just I'll always be alone, or whatever the thoughts are that creep in. Just know that there's a two-pronged approach, and one is spiritual, and I think it's through surrendering to the cross and surrendering through Jesus. It's a religious, metaphysical thing, but then there's also the physical and the communal aspects of it, is connecting with people, calling a friend and saying, this is where I'm at, calling a therapist and saying, hey, I need help, and calling a psychiatrist and saying, I may need medication. My serotonin levels may be low. Get tested. And so we just believe that God has got his hands in all of this. There's a reason for church and there's a reason for the hospital, and they're both, I think, honored by God. So how are we doing on time? What time is it? 1:45. Cool. So just a little bit ago, I asked you about the happiest days of your life.
Yeah.
Oddly, my answer was not nearly as good as your answer. My answer is, man, when I got to college and I was away from home and I could listen to Pearl Jam cranked at 211 on my stereo. There was something about that time period of like the first liberation and the first freedom of my life. And actually, that was the time period when I was starting to connect with Jesus. And so there's this but there's something about independence and freedom for me. But for you, your answer was right now. You're living it.
Yeah.
Talk about that. So you've somehow gone from a part where you were on suicide watch with your friends to now. It seems like you and Shannon are pretty well connected, and the marriage is pretty healthy. And if somebody asks you, when's your happiest time? It's bam, it's right here, right now. Yeah.
I just realized what's hers is hers, and what's mine is hers. And so, it's been great. It's been great. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. In a way, it feels like even in the darkest times of my life, it's always been beautiful. I mean, it's all a gift. You've got blood in your veins. You got a heart that's ticking in your chest. You got breath in your lungs. It's a gift. And so I think the last few years, I've been waking up to the reality of the wonder of being human and being alive. And there's a poem I was reading recently by Rumi. He was a Turkish poet, and he talked about, in the morning you might be greeted with sorrow. In the morning you might be greeted with pain. In the morning you might be greeted with joy. But let them in the door like friends, because each of them carry gifts within them. And so for me, on the good days, on the bad days, currently, I'm just deeply grateful to be alive, and grateful that I get to do what I dreamt of doing growing up as a young man, and I get to do it with my best friend, and I get to do this on Sunday. It's ridiculous. So I still have bad days, I still have hard days, but I think for me, gratitude. Something as simple as waking up in the morning, having a cup of coffee, and writing 3 things that you're deeply, deeply grateful for. And something that really helped me was taking it from that to literally closing your eyes and thinking about a memory or something in your life that you were really deeply grateful. And for me, that's the Blue Lagoon in Iceland with my wife 4 years ago. And as I'm thinking about it right now, I'm in the water, I'm seeing her, and I'm realizing we're both getting a horrible sunburn, and this is going to hurt in the hotel room later. But it's really funny and it's really beautiful. And so if you can cultivate that type of a state every day in some way, shape, or form, you're changing what you're focusing on. Because there's good and there's bad. But, the Bible says, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. And as water reflects, what's that in the New Testament? It's like, so the countenance of a man reflects.
I'm just a pastor, bro. I don't
Okay. But you just get what you focus on. You really do. I wholeheartedly believe that. So I've been the last few years, I've just been really trying to acknowledge the pain, but also focus on the things I'm really grateful for, and figure out what I did with my sandal. There we go.
It's holy ground, brother. So one of the privileges of preaching here at Daylight, and we want to thank Chris Booker and Chris Mueller for the work that they put in every week, putting on. So we're live casting right now, and a lot of people will see this. Is there's maybe 50 or 60 people in the room, and there's going to be 150 or 180 that watch this later. And so pre-COVID, the numbers were, what did we say, one in 7 people that dealt with like clinical anxiety and depression. And post-COVID, that number has bumped to about 2 out of 5. It's been just a geometric rise in the cases of people needing clinical help or needing medication or needing therapy for their depression and anxiety. And so statistically, there's a bunch of people in this room that need to hear what you're having to say, and even more so listening online. What do you say to the person who's in a dark place or even walking a dark road of despair or anguish or loneliness or pain or fear? What do you say to those people?
I would absolutely beg you to limit your screen time. Like, if you can, delete Instagram and Facebook, all of those apps, like get them off your phone. Spend as little time on your phone or in front of a television as possible. There's millions and millions of dollars being spent every single year to make you feel like you are not enough, to make you compare your life, your behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reels, and feel like you'll be happier, better, smarter, faster when you buy this thing. So that would be step 1. Minimize the amount of time you spend comparing your life to someone else's. I have a screen time setting on my phone that limits the amount of time I spend in all of those apps, and it just helps me. The other thing I would say, and it sounds simple, but just get a good night's sleep. I know that sounds so basic, but if you are consistently getting 6 hours of sleep per night or less, if you sustain that over the course of 2 weeks or more, you're actually, if you're driving a vehicle, you're driving more impaired than somebody who is drunk driving. So sleep is huge. Huge. I can't emphasize it enough. And then the other 2 things I would say is have a journal. I would, if you're, again, a coffee drinker or a tea drinker, have that journal set beside your coffee or whatever your morning routine is, and give yourself permission to write whatever it is that you're feeling. I swear in my journal sometimes, I'm like, tomorrow morning it'll probably be like, I was really awkward at Daylight Church when I dropped my sandal, and HL said, this is holy ground. Right?
I was the awkward one.
Yeah.
That was a pretty churchy, weirdo moment.
And it could be that. It could be like, I tried really hard not to pick my nose, but I did it anyway. It could be anything, but you have to give yourself permission to take all of your anger, your frustration, your fears, your joys, your insecurities, and put it somewhere. Because if you're not taking it out of your head, your heart, your soul, it's just staying in there. And that's the equivalent of getting shot and then thinking like, well, maybe I'll just get a pizza. It's like, great. I'm sure the pizza is going to be awesome, but you still have a gaping wound in your body that needs to be addressed. So, and then lastly, besides the morning journaling, I would say walk. That is one of the healthiest forms of exercises, and just walking, especially if you can get out in nature without music, listen to the birds sing in the trees, feel the wind on your skin, just get alone. Because, and the longer you can walk, the better. There we go. The longer you can walk, the better. My therapist recommends, if you can do 15 to 25 or an hour. Because what happens is, the way that our brains work, and I'm not super smart with this stuff, but I've been in therapy for half a decade, and what my therapist had said is, throughout every day, we're experiencing an overwhelming amount of stimuli through our screens, the conversations that we have. And your brain, while you're sleeping, needs to process that. But when you go for a walk for, say, 10 minutes or 15 minutes, you're basically just processing whatever it is that you've experienced within the last 24 hours. But once you get past that threshold, that's where other things start to come up, and your brain, as well as your spirit, are really able to start unpacking some of that stuff. So, and the other encouragement I would give is when you're in those times of darkness and you're feeling suicidal, ask yourself why. Like, why am I feeling this way? Wait a second. So for me, I'll give you a really vulnerable example. Like, our band's pretty successful, but we're not where I would like to be. So it's really easy for me to get online and be triggered when I see that band's bigger than ours. And then before I know it, if I'm not watching that, I could be down in the dumps, sitting in my underwear, watching like reruns of New Girl on the couch, feeling really depressed, but also really good because of Jet's Pizza. God bless America. And then if I'm noticing myself feeling terrible, and I ask, like, why? Oh, wait a second. You got your phone out this morning instead of journaling, and you were comparing someone else's highlight reels to your life, and now you feel like garbage. And so being able to identify what is triggering you to walk down those negative paths can help you. It's like if you're an alcoholic, stay away from the bar, right? And so if you're really, really sad, start asking how did I get here? What led me down this road? And that will help you have a better grip on it moving forward.
We've been talking in here pretty recently about contemplation and the importance of being sensual, meaning God has blessed us with vision and the sense of smell and the sense of hearing and touch and taste and the beauty of actually physically touching a tree and feeling the tree and connecting with nature in weird ways, which sounds way more hippie than it has sounded over the last few weeks. But there's something about living right here, right now, not where I ought to be or where I want to be or where that other band is or where this other person is or they're taking better vacations than me or they have more money than me or there's something existentially satisfying in groundedness. The old Celtic prayer of earth below me, sky above me, wind surrounds me, Christ with me. Yeah. And I really appreciate what you have to say. I want to add to it as well that this is a perfect example of what we're talking about is attacking it from both angles. And you'll notice what he didn't say was pray harder. And I'm of the opinion of what he's describing, journaling, contemplating, going for a walk. This is what we mean by prayer. And so a lot of times you're gonna hear that you ought to pray harder, meaning I ought to be on my knees with my knuckles clenched, saying, Jesus, please help me get over my depression. God, please make me better. Please let me be less of a sinner or whatever else it is. And that to me illustrates a broken child-father relationship. Jason Clark always says that a relationship built on desperation is not the relationship of a loving father to a beloved son. And if you're attempts to escape place you in the position where you feel like you've got to twist God's arm to get the thing done, then there's a disconnect with how God's eyes shine upon you at all times. He hungers and desires for you to be free, to be liberated, and there's no arm twisting that needs to happen. And it could be as simple as you need a better night's sleep. You need to drink more water. You need to stop browsing the stuff that triggers you. And so, I think those things are heard in moments of silence and clarity. What's the old Queensryche song? Silent lucidity. There's moments that occur in your life where you shut everything down and just are. And that's when the voice of God shows up and will give you direction. But I can tell you this is what the voice of God says to you right now. You are beloved. Don't be scared. I'm with you. Be. Turn towards. Surrender. It's like getting on a river and floating. You're not grasping and struggling and trying to reach the top. It's, with my kids when they go to swim lessons, the first thing they teach a kid is not the breaststroke. Anybody done swim lessons? What's the first thing they teach a kid? Not even dog paddle. They all yell at once. That's exactly right. They teach them to roll over and float, roll over and breathe. And I've seen it occur with 1-year-olds. They teach them the first move is just to roll over and be and let the water. And that's kind of the gospel in a nutshell. This is not you're never going to be able to muscle up enough to conquer whatever the thing is that you need to conquer. But you can be supported by Jesus, the living water. And kind of our only job is just to roll over and float. Thoughts?
That's so good. So good.
I like that thought. I thought it was pretty good too. So you're going to do another song for us, and it ends in hope. Around the corner. Talk about that for just a second. So you've obviously experienced a transformation. It's not to say that this is a hand wave and everything's just hunky-dory and perfect all the time, but you're living in a different headspace now.
Yeah.
Is hope just something preachers throw out because it earns them a paycheck, or is this a for real thing? Is there a reason for hope?
Absolutely for real. I was trying to think of something funny to say, but no, it's real. It is, but I don't. I come from a very non-denominational background, and I love that. And one of the things that I really loved about it was praying at the altar, and if you're going through something, receiving prayer. But what happened to me, you have those moments with a kid that has like a really traumatic upbringing and no strong father figure. I sort of was always going to the front, like waiting for this like massive change. It was like I wanted to get a prayer that would take care of everything and not have to do any of the work, Mm-hmm. So I think there is hope, and like you said, you just need to float. You need to let go, and I think it just looks. It looks different. I guess for me, hope isn't this utopia where everything is in our lives, like our finances, our health, everything's like all perfect and hunky-dory. It's this thing that sustains you inside. It's the ability to create your own weather, no matter what the weather is like on the outside. You just have this inner peace that can guide you through any storm.
I'm reminded of the C.S. Lewis quote that talks about how we wouldn't know what a crooked line was if we didn't have a straight line to compare it to. And in some sense, that's part of this conversation is that, and you've talked about it, you quoted a poem about the idea that when joy knocks on your door, that's one thing, but when despair knocks on your door, that's another, but they both can be friends in that they can lead you somewhere. And so a lot of what gets said in popular psychiatry today or psychology today is to lean into pain, to lean into it. Because what it does is to recognize the pain, to recognize the trauma, to recognize the anguish is also to recognize what you're comparing it to and to give you clarity on where you want to be. And so a lot of times what we do is when we're really suffering, and I'm probably stretching too long now, but what we do is we get in our underwear and we watch TV shows and we order Jets Pizza and we don't embrace the pain. We don't see the pain. We don't feel the pain. We don't let it do what it's meant to do. Pain is pain is technically a helpful thing because it warns you of danger. It's a defense mechanism. And so when you're experiencing pain, a lot of people, preachers and psychiatrists both will tell you, lean into it, feel it, recognize it, see it, because it's going to lead you towards the hope. Without seeing it, you're not comparing it to anything, and the comparison is where you see the light at the end of the tunnel. You guys are close. Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
The stuff you said was really good, too.
I guess I'm trying to think of another witty thing. Can I make one more nerdy note?
Do your thing.
It'll only be another hour and a half, I promise.
Perfect.
When you're triggered, also be mindful of the way that you cope, the negative, whether it's, for me, it's, now that porn is no longer an issue for me, I have to watch eating as like a way to kind of cope. So it's easy to get triggered and then run to your coping mechanisms that are negative, and then so you compare, you get sad, and then you cope, and then you're sad because you just coped, and then you get sad again, and then you run. It's like a vicious cycle. So being aware of the ways we cope that aren't healthy, and trying to replace those things with healthy coping mechanisms is really helpful too.
One of the reasons I wanted to have Mike and Shannon with us was because at audio feed, and I think if I remember right from the stage, you said this is kind of the first time I've talked about this publicly.
Yeah.
And he talked about the struggles he'd been through and the light at the end of the tunnel. And people lined up for an hour and a half, 2 hours to talk to you afterwards. I mean, people just lined up in rows. And I stood there because I was handling your merch table at the time. And I heard the conversations, and so many of them were like, man, I just dealt with exactly what you're talking about, or I've been suicidal, or I've been dealing with anxiety. And it was just person after person after person lined up in a row being open and willing to be transparent. And so first off, thanks for being that guy. Thanks for being open, and I know it's not easy to get up and talk about trauma or talk about pain or even to say I need a therapist or I'm on medication or whatever. So thanks for your transparency and openness because it gives license to other people. And I want to encourage you to see that. All of us have trauma. All of us have pain. And there's something liberating and freeing about it. It doesn't mean you, and we've talked about this so much in here, confession and so forth. It doesn't mean you air your dirty laundry everywhere and you talk about every thought you have and every compulsion you have and every addiction that you deal with to every single person. But there is something to being open and transparent to say, I don't have it all together. That's kind of the beginning of the gospel in a lot of circles, is just the confession of, I need a Savior. I don't have it all together.